is the sense of contentment that we have with the way things are. No matter how hard life is at times, we can usually see a way through to hopefully better times. But there is a growing sense among our population that something is amiss. Is it not true? Something is amiss. Let's look at some of the current events that could lead people to believe in a possible doomsday scenario. We have a lot of weather-related events going on, don't we? We've been seeing this probably over the last decade and even longer. We had Hurricane Katrina. We had the very large and devastating earthquake in Haiti. Superstorm Sandy that just happened not too long ago on the East Coast. Largest storm to ever hit landfall recorded in the Philippines last year. We have global warming, or maybe after this winter in Michigan, we should call it global cooling. At any rate, we all now know what polar vortex means. And we also have seen that the tornado seasons have been intensifying over the years. We have lots of things in the news. We hear all sorts of things daily about wars and rumors of wars, and the Bible tells us that. We have widespread suffering of poor and afflicted. You only need to turn on the evening news to hear something about that. We have mass shootings in public places, such as schools and malls. And even this last week, I'm sure you have heard of the latest round of violence in a school in Pennsylvania, where they had the school stabbing this past week. You know, now in school, we have less fire drills and more lockdown drills. A big change from maybe when you were in school. We have the missing Malaysian flight 370. How does a jet airliner just disappear? I don't even know. I know they think they're getting close to finding it now. I hear that they're hearing the pings, but they still have not been able to reproduce even one piece of this flight to let us know what happened. We have cruel dictators like Kim Jong-un of North Korea, who's been doing horrific things to the people in his country, and the world around us, we're really just learning about some of these things, and some of them may be true and some may not be true. But I would encourage us to know, to do our best to know what is happening in the world around us and to research, look into things, and see on our own so that we know and understand. In the political world, and I am not a political person, I do not get into politics at all, but it's hard not to hear about it nowadays. And the biggest takeaway I have lately is just that I feel there's this overall ineffectiveness across the board in leadership. And we see economic times. One day the market is up and everybody's happy, and the next day it's down and we don't know what to do. And so it's just this pattern of up and down. The federal government has been very involved in reaching into local public education. And you may wonder why I even would be concerned about local public education, being an Adventist educator for over 20 years. But you know, it is our civil responsibility as citizens to still be concerned about all the kids in our community receiving an education, right? And so some of the things that the federal government has recently done to be involved in local public schools are programs like No Child Left Behind or Race to the Top. You may not be real familiar with these, although education is a top story in the news quite often. Both of these programs have largely been marked as failures. But now they've come out with a third federal program called the Common Core. If we look at their record of the past, we really don't have any measure of confidence that there'll be success with Common Core either. We have things like RFIDs, and these I do know what they are, radio frequency identification chips. Have any of you heard of these devices? It's just a little device that can be inserted under your skin And it can collect data of all sorts. It could monitor, track things. It can have all your health insurance. Like when you check in at the doctor's office, they can scan it and it'll tell them everything in your health history. It is already being used for purchasing power and to buy things. Could this be a technology that fulfills the end time prophecy of us not being able to buy or sell? In the religious world, we have a lot of things happening there as well. There's several things where there's a blurring of lines between church and state. Religious organizations' right to hire and fire based on their religious convictions are being threatened. I hear a little bit about this in terms of the education world. I can share with you two brief stories that recently have come, within the last probably year and a half to my attention. Religious schools now are having a difficult time when it comes to doing this. For instance, a Catholic school in Ohio made a decision to let an employee go, a longtime female PE teacher who decided to publicly announce her life partner and her alternative lifestyle, and the school made the decision to let her go based on their organization's belief, and even in their contract that these things can be very clearly listed out in a contract, and they decided to let her go. And in response to that, of course, there's a lawsuit, and she sues them. And we expect people sometimes to sue when they're unhappy, but the unexpected piece is that their constituency, their school family, and their church family really rose up in support of this PE teacher, which is an interesting aspect. A second one, again, it just happened to be another Catholic school, and they had a teacher who became pregnant out of wedlock. And so again, they chose to let her go. And again, it was the same scenario where they have a lawsuit brought against them and a constituency that is very challenged by the church holding up its own doctrines. We have healthcare laws that infringe on our religious beliefs as well. A company that I'm thinking of that I've heard about in the news, and maybe you have as well, is Hobby Lobby. But very challenged by the new health laws that are coming into effect. Although it's a for-profit organization, it is run by a Christian man. And he has challenges with providing some of this health care to his employees that challenge his beliefs in terms of mainly contraception or abortion, these types of things. We have Pope Francis, a very, very popular pope for our time. About a month ago, I was at a technology convention here in the state of Michigan that we went to. It was not an Adventist convention, it was a state convention. And one of their keynote speakers was addressing us, and he declared, I am not a religious person. I don't claim to belong to any church, but I am really connecting with Pope Francis and some of the things that he is doing. This Pope really seems to have the ability to touch many of the people in our community across a broad spectrum. Even Speaker Boehner has invited Pope Francis to address Congress here in the United States. Now, as Adventists, a fairly significant event happened recently, and it has been brought to our attention by Doug Batchelor and Amazing Facts. And it's a video. For those of you that have not seen it, the video records Bishop Tony Palmer and his address to religious leaders at a charismatics convention. Now, Bishop Palmer's address was based on unity between faiths, with Catholicism being the umbrella in which we unite. Now, Palmer's message was supported via video conferencing, a live video conference with Pope Francis, as he expressed his desire for unity among the denominations as well. I'm going to show you just a brief 3-minute video or clip from this video. and just give it a second, it'll come. You might need to turn it up.
Talk to you about some very interesting events that have recently transpired that have profound prophetic implications. We're going to take a few moments and look at a unique video that was just posted on the internet. It's a special message from Pope Francis to a convocation filled with charismatic and Pentecostal ministers. It's an appeal for unity, for them to unite or to join again with the Catholic Church. It's an invitation for them to be one. And I think this is very significant. We won't be able to show the whole video. We will post it at the Amazing Facts website if you'd like to view it in its entirety. But I'd like to go through and look at it and highlight some points that I want to bring to your attention. Why don't we go ahead and we'll roll that now.
I believe that God has brought me here to this year's Ministers' Conference in the spirit of Elijah. Let me explain. If you look carefully, the spirit of Elijah was on John the Baptist to turn the hearts of the sons to the fathers.
Well, let's pause the tape right there. Now, in a moment, we're going to be hearing a personal message from Pope Francis. But to me, even more interesting is the question about who is this Bishop Tony Palmer? A very dashing individual that seems to have a personal relationship with the Pope and is being sent as an envoy of the Pope. He sort of is a mediator in that he's not technically a Catholic, he's an Anglican. He has his own ministry that is specifically focused on bringing unity to the churches. And he's not just going to this conference of the charismatics, but he's making the rounds in every way he can to bring the different churches together. He does a masterful job as framing himself as the prophet Elijah with a message to bring the children back to the fathers and the fathers to the children. A message of unity, playing down doctrinal differences. You can listen and see what you think.
And to turn the hearts of the fathers to the sons, to prepare the way for the Lord. And we know that prophecy always has a double fulfillment. And we know that Elijah will come before the second coming as well. And I've understood that the spirit of Elijah is the spirit of reconciliation, to return hearts to each other. This is very important. We know that the first 1,000 years there was one church, it was called the Catholic Church. And the word Catholic means universal, it doesn't mean Roman. Catholic means, if you're born again, raise your hand if you're born again. You're a Catholic.
Don't want to make too much out of it because he's right. The word Catholic does technically mean universal. But what you're seeing here is in very careful, deliberate increments, the distinctions between Catholics and Protestants are being broken down.
Palmer goes on to claim that the protest started by Luther is over. And since there's no longer a protest, how can we have Protestant churches? He calls for unity and love, stating that doctrines can be left to be sorted out in heaven. I've got two more short clips. They're about 10 seconds each that I'm just going to show you here, and then we'll keep going.
It's the glory. If you accept that Christ is living in me and the presence of God is in me and the presence of God is in you, that's all we need. Because God will sort out all our doctrines when we get upstairs.
Over again. Let's play.
Therefore, Christian unity is the basis of our credibility. Because Jesus said until they won, they will not believe. The world will not believe, as they should, until we are one. Division destroys our credibility. It is fear that keeps us separated because...
Do you find that interesting? I think that for me, growing up Adventist, I have long anticipated that there would be a pope in the future that would take from us our religious freedoms. But in this video, if you listen to it carefully, it is quite the opposite. we see the religions of the world aligning with the Pope and his agenda freely. If you haven't watched the video, I would really encourage you to watch the whole thing. You can see it at the Amazing Facts website. It's about 40 minutes total. I didn't show you the section where the Pope comes on and speaks, mainly because he speaks in Italian, and so it's a little broken up, but if you watch it on the video, the subtitles are there, and it translates it for you, and it's very, very interesting. From the Adventist standpoint, this is a significant event in the Christian world. We are told in Matthew 24, in the chapter, verses 1 through 31, a great many things. We're told about the wars and the rumors of wars. We're told about famines and earthquakes. And these are referred to by Jesus as the beginning of birth pains. And he encourages us, doesn't he? He doesn't leave us there. He encourages us to not be alarmed. We know that the beginning of birth pains are usually spaced far apart, and that we have something, the beginning of birth pains are usually spaced far apart, and that we have some time before we should panic. But as the birth pains come more frequently and become more painful, we rapidly descend into panic, followed quickly by some chaos, and sometime soon afterwards, we do end up with a baby that we've known for quite some time is coming, yet it still seems to be a surprise at its arrival. He then says, after this comes a time of persecution, when those who today are brothers and sisters in Christ will betray and hate each other. Although we may not see this in our midst in America largely at this time, we have a historical marker to remind us that violence against those who don't believe the same as others is not unheard of and not that far in the past. We do believe that in the end of time, there will be a union of political and religious powers, and we do see the Vatican having unprecedented access to world leaders and world leaders that are seeking and valuing the Pope's counsel. Not only is his power growing among our political leaders, but with our religious leaders as well, which is a really significant fact for us. Is there anybody here that remembers where they were at and what they were doing when JFK was shot? Okay, very good. In a little bit more recent, is there anybody here that remembers where they were and what they were doing on 9/11? Okay, I know I do. On 9/11, I was teaching in Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin. I was in a small classroom teaching my kids when a parent stepped in the room and informed me about what had happened. I was 4 months pregnant at that time with my son, Hunter. And I remember going home that evening and watching the news footage. And they're just playing it over and over and over again. Those planes flying into the World Trade Center. Do you remember that? And just watching it in disbelief. Almost immediately, I remember hearing talk from Adventist friends and families of, oh, this is the end of time. This is an end time event. And like many other Americans at that time, because we know that lots of Americans ended up going back to church at this time period. The churches were overflowing. Like many Americans, I felt a sense of urgency, really, to reconnect with my Savior. And so I got my Bible out, and I knew that in Matthew there was I could do some reading about end time events and refresh my memory a little bit. And so I went to the concordance and I looked it up, and this is the verse I read. I went to Matthew 24, I opened it up, and This is the verse I read. But woe unto them that are with child and nursing in those days. I am not kidding you. That is the first verse that my eyes fell on. And I said, really, Lord? But I saw myself. I was in that verse. It was me. And I'll admit that it was quite unsettling to me, and it did leave me in a little near to panic. But it was during my prayer time that the Lord gave me great peace. Communicated very clearly to me that regardless of all the events and all the chaos that was going on around me, He had not forsaken me, and that He would be right by my side. The purpose of my sermon today is not just to focus on end time events, or even where we're at in history, or to give you a countdown and go, here we are. My message is hopefully inspirational in that we might see His return. And when I say we, maybe we right here in this sanctuary would be the living generation on the earth resurrection morning. My message is to reconnect to the belief that Jesus is, in fact, coming again, despite what we might view as a delay. Because in our time, 9/11 was a decade ago, over a decade ago, but in heaven's time, it only happened a few years ago. There is a quickening of the events that we are told will lead up to Jesus' return. The Bible tells us that bad days are coming, but the good news is that immediately following those bad days, we will see Jesus face to face. Is our sense of urgency tied to specific events, or is it firmly rooted in a belief backed up by what we know is biblical prophecy? Now, if you know me at all, that I can't give a sermon without touching on Adventist education, which is something very near and dear to my heart. So if you're waiting for it, here it comes. I won't disappoint you. Friends, time is short. And our kids need to be reminded and surrounded every day with this message of good news and victory. At our village school, when you walk into our building, and you would see things like this throughout the classrooms, but when you walk into our building, right in the foyer, there are 3 pictures by Nathan Green. And actually, all of them have a heaven theme. This is one I just took a picture of with Jesus and the children, a lion and a lamb, a beautiful picture of a depiction of heaven. And the very mission of our school is a legacy in heaven. I have a quote here I want to share with you from the book How to Kill Adventist Education. And for the majority of our church's history, our schools have done highly significant work in guaranteeing that if Christ waits another generation before He returns, there will still be a faithful Adventist church charging ahead, seeking to present souls to God for His kingdom. We are a called people, designed to be an end-time, Jesus-loving, Satan-crushing steamroller of a movement that passionately pursues Christ and His cause at the climax of history. And I believe that whatever our success has been at being that is in very large part a result of Adventist education. Although we know that there are some dark days ahead, we still have the joy of foreknowledge. Jesus hasn't left us wondering what the end of the story is. We have the joy of foreknowledge that every knee shall bow and every tongue confess and we, his faithful, will celebrate with him what we have hoped for and what he has longed to give us. Thank you. Father in heaven, we just want to praise your name this morning and thank you for being such a loving Father, for being next to us, Lord, through good times and bad times, for sharing your holy word with us so we can read and learn and know more about you, more about end time events. We just pray for your holy presence to be here with us. Help us as we continue to worship on your Sabbath day. We ask this in your name. Amen.